It is my honor to welcome you again to about the 43rd annual meeting of Doctors for Disaster Preparedness. I think we really are at a crossroads, that we have hope that some things that can make a dramatic and positive change. I would like to thank all of the people who have made this possible, our awesome audience, our world-class speakers who I'll tell you are not coming here for the money, and for our extraordinarily generous directors and other people who have contributed to make this meeting possible. A lot of things have changed, but a lot of things have remained the same. In the 1980s, when DDP started, it was a branch of TACDA, the American Civil Defense Association. And at that time, there was all the buzz about the nuclear arms race. And it was the nuclear freeze movement. And Physicians for Social Responsibility, or PSR, was speaking at our medical school and publishing articles in the New England Journal of Medicine about the horrors of the end of the world from nuclear weapons. And this has sort of died down for a while, but then in Science in 2024 was said that the risk of nuclear war has not been so high since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And again, just this Thursday this week, the Washington Post had a big article about how nuclear attack on the U.S. might develop, and it would be everybody will die, and there's nothing you can do, and it'll be the end of the world. That's basically the message. So what has changed since the 1980s? The threat of mutual assured destruction back then involved the U.S. and the USSR. But as Isaac Newton, once you get beyond two bodies and you have a three-body problem, it's a whole lot harder to figure out what's going to happen with gravitation. And now we have at least 9 nuclear powers. A strategic triad back then, it's doubtful that we have any reliable things other than the submarine-launched ballistic missiles now. And we do know that some drones launched from the back of trucks wiped out at least a part of the Russians' nuclear bombing, part of their strategic triad. In fact, now the arms race might be the drone war between Russia and Ukraine to see who can get the drones that can manage to survive the countermeasures of the other. Arms control back then was a simpler matter where you count the missiles and you count the warheads, but now we have warheads that can probably maneuver. We have hypersonic missiles that the U.S. has probably neglected, but Russia and China have not. And then the asymmetric warfare of these relatively inexpensive drones that can take down a billion-dollar airplane. It has been assumed that we had U.S. superiority, but this technology is now 80 years old, and even rogue nations can figure out how to make a nuclear bomb. Much of our engineering expertise is gone because the people who worked on the program are dead, and it's not been really carried on here. So I think that is not a good situation. But it may turn out that after all, when all is said and done, geography may turn out to be the god of war. Here we have a map that shows the Strait of Hormuz that maybe Iran will choose to block, and that carries 20% of the world's oil trade. Civil defense, that was what was opposed back in the 1980s by the nuclear freeze movement. That is also 80-year-old technology. The people who developed it are gone. The people who ran programs in the 1950s are gone. Yet, the laws of physics do not change, and what worked, the nuclear weapons effects are the same, and what worked for protection still work now. The propaganda effort is still the same. The fear pornography, which is supported by the linear no-threshold theory that there is no safe dose of radiation used to terrify people, so that even if they are well outside the range of destruction, they may be unable to function because they fear a slight increase in radiation, and they mostly have no way to measure it. But most importantly, I think, for survival is the will to survive, the belief that your civilization is worth carrying on, and I think that is probably our biggest threat. Crescent Carney, who spoke here many times, said the United States is never going to have a national civil defense program, so he put his effort into these field-tested instructions in nuclear war survival skills. If you've come to these meetings and you don't have a copy of this book and you haven't read at least the first 30 pages, I suggest you do it right now. If the internet's down and the power is off, you need to have a printed copy. Stephen Harris has been incredibly dedicated to preserving Crescent Carney's work, and his book is the same nuclear war survival skills, but it has interpolated pages for things that have changed, like technology or just supplies that are no longer available. Very sad to tell you, we have lost our most energetic civil defense supporter. This is the Dragon Cycle that Stephen Jones rode from Martha's Vineyard to San Diego, carrying the message of civil defense. He has probably contacted firsthand more people, especially first responders, with life-saving information. There he is at a fire station. Here he is at a DDP meeting displaying things that he made, that the home makeable Carney fallout meter is probably the best that could be available. It is accurate. It covers wartime levels of radiation. And he and his 11 children made, I don't know how many thousands of them. His expedient of an expedient, which is based on U.S. government technology, that of materials that chemically change color when exposed to radiation. And the rad triage cars use that. But he made the oh shucks meter, which is the really a anti-panic device. Will tell you whether you're safe or not safe, whether you can continue to work or whether you need to go for shelter. He had the ambition of making enough of these to supply all the first responders in this country. And I believe he acquired the materials, but as far as I know, no one is carrying on this work. So the oh shucks meters that exist are the ones that we're going to have, so I can no longer just give you a free one, but we do need contributions, and if you give us $100 or so in contributions, we'll give you one of these. You can also buy them for $25 each is the latest price from ki4u.com, and they do make generous discounts for volume purchases. And here is the laboratory at Shane Connor's outfit, ki4u.com. I think it's the only laboratory in the U.S. for civilian calibration of these radiation instruments. I mean, they're old, but they're serviceable, they're affordable, and they do have the proper range, unlike these extremely expensive things that are out of range if you really get into a dangerous level. And this is Steve Jones, one of Steve Jones's favorite poems, The Charge of the Light Brigade. I guess I skipped the first verse, but never mind. And it was in the war in Crimea. The Russians were fighting in Crimea long, long ago. And here is one of the verses, Forward, the Light Brigade. Was there a man dismayed? Not, though the soldier knew someone had blundered. There's not to reason why, make reply, there's not to reason why, there's but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Flashed all their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there, charging an army, while all the world wondered. Well, the blunder was they initially meant to order the brigade to attack someplace where they might have a chance to succeed, but the order got miscommunicated, and instead they were sent into a valley which was defended by well-entrenched Russians who were using heavy artillery. So here were these guys using swords to fight against guns. And of course, most of them died. The lesson is that if you're going to fight with somebody, figure out what kind of weapons they have. This is the technology believed to be currently available to the People's Liberation Army, that is the Chinese Communists. But the world is full of existential threats. It's not just nuclear war. And we hear about these all the time, and PSR has them on their website, climate change. And the remedy is pretty much the same, unilateral disarmament. We will shut down our industry that uses coal and oil and natural gas to generate energy. But this won't do any good if China and India don't do it. But it won't make any difference anyway, since CO2 is not the climate driver, as we will learn. There's all of this concern about poisons in our food. And this goes by the linear no threshold hypothesis also, that if something is toxic, well, maybe if it's made from a demon like petroleum, then the tiniest dose could kill you, and so we have to try to get rid of it. Ban chemicals without regard to the risk or benefit or the possibility of hormesis. And then, of course, there's pollution that can be used to cripple industry, agriculture, and our access to energy. But again, I think the worst thing is loss of will to survive. The concept of eugenics is old. This comes from a Science article back in the 1920s, 1921, about a conference where people from all over the world were welcome to talk about this, especially the United States. Thanks to the Nazis, this kind of got a bad rep, and we don't really talk about it that much. However, the idea never went away. And we have the same Malthusian tools to manage the human herd, which is overpopulated by about 8 or 9 billion by now, and needs to be managed. Weapons are famine, war, eliminating the unfit, and disease. As Malthus pointed out, the infant is, comparatively speaking, of little value to society, as others will immediately supply its place. And if we dreaded famine, we should sedulously encourage the other forms of destruction. In our towns, we should make the streets narrower, crowd more people into the houses, and court the return of the plague. There's these biological warfare and chemical warfare, the poor man's atomic bomb, are the really big threats according to Lowell Wood, and his presentation at our 2002 annual meeting is here. The U.S. had a bioweapons program from 1943 to 1969, and when the Biological Weapons Convention came along, we just turned it into defensive-only uses. We had weaponized 7 agents then. There are more genetically modified agents, who knows where. There are more than 1,000 biological laboratories in the United States, and then they're all over the world. There are, China, Ukraine, don't know where all they are. But as Connie Chester pointed out at one of our meetings, from Oak Ridge, and he spoke about chemical warfare, there's a problem with those who want to use it. Distributing it and it breaking down in the atmosphere. You can put nerve gas in the subway and kill a lot of people, but that's as far as it goes. And Sasha Latipova pointed out that it is impossible to make an agent, a biological agent, that is both lethal and highly spreadable, because after all, a dead person is not around coughing on people. She learned that in a Soviet high school from a drunken colonel, but nevertheless, I still think it's correct. You're, of course, aware of all of the books and movies about the unsurvivability of nuclear warfare, while biological warfare has the same sort of genre of publications, including this book, The Cobra Event, that Bill Clinton caused Bill Clinton to adopt certain policies. What I'm going to tell you here, well, you can consider it science fiction. It's hypothetical. I'm not saying I know who done it. I know that it was done deliberately, or that it was by accident. But if you wanted to concoct something to make chemical and biological warfare really effective, this is what you might do. First is you might inspire widespread fear of a horrible new disease, and have daily reports of casualties at the top of the news. And then you could control communications so that people couldn't get misinformation about the real casualty rate or about possible ways to prevent or to treat it. And then you can develop a countermeasure. This could be something injectable, and you can get people lining up in parking lots or all over the place to get this wonderful new countermeasure. could get it all over the world, millions and billions of doses in a very short period of time. And you can call it something safe and effective like a vaccine. Now, all of those millions of vials do not necessarily have the same contents. Some of the people get their shot and they feel really good. Some of them get it and don't notice anything. Occasionally somebody drops dead or has a stroke, but people die and have strokes all the time, so not to worry about that. And the magical compound, this miraculous advance in science, causes the recipient's own body to manufacture the antigen to which the body's supposed to develop immunity. But just coincidentally, this antigen happens to be toxic in and of itself. And unlike the shots, the normal shots that you get, it has no off switch. So we could have a lurking disaster if somebody tried to use that. To understand a lot of the things about the COVID-19 vaccines, you need a lot more knowledge of molecular biology than I have, but I do have a friend who is an expert in that. He answers all my questions, fully referenced, but every time he asks me this question, and he calls it the elevator question. Imagine you are a beautiful young woman waiting for the express elevator, and when it arrives, there's a stranger inside. Do you get on the elevator? And Jeremy, with the help of some AI, has created an image of this question for you. And I think this is a very important part of disaster preparedness, which is situational awareness. You have this new thing coming out, and not everything is known about it. Do you get on the elevator or not? So always keep that in mind. Necessities for survival that we always talk about at these meetings. You should, of course, have your basic preparedness, some food and water and medicines and so on, and your copy of Nuclear War Survival Skills. Always have critical thinking turned on at every level of society. We must have freedom of thought and action so that we can communicate our knowledge and concerns. The moral imperative is live not by lies and be not afraid. Considering all the political things that happen, must always remember, put not your trust in princes, nor in the Son of Man in whom there is no help. And if we're looking on the international scene as to who's superior and all that, we must always remember that pride goeth before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. And I have here some references and resources that I hope you will find helpful. And thank you so much for coming to the meeting, and we hope that you'll have a very enjoyable time. Thank you.